The 21st century is certainly young, but for horror fans, it's already been an exciting one. Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the top 20 best horror movies of the century so far. For this list, we'll be looking at horror movies that came out between 2000 and 2019 and ranking them based on a mix of critical and fan acclaim, influence, and lasting legacy on the genre. Number 20, Black Swan. Darren Aronofsky was already a veteran director in Hollywood by the time 2010 came around, but he really made his mark in the horror world with Black Swan. Exposing a more macabre side to the world of professional ballet, the film stars Natalie Portman as Nina Sayers, a young dancer with the New York City Ballet Company who shoulders the immense pressure of playing the dual role of both the black and the white swan in a production of Swan Lake.
Transcendence, and very few have it in them.
I think I do have it in.
As the stress of Nina's position begins to chip away at her mental health, she becomes a danger to herself and others. It makes for an intoxicating and magical viewing experience, and an essential entry in 21st century horror. Number 19, The Descent. If you or any of your friends ever debated going spelunking into uncharted caves, 2005's The Descent should provide ample discouragement.
When you think it's dark when you turn out the lights, well, down there, it's pitch black.
When 6 women venture into dark, cramped tunnels looking for adventure, things go horribly wrong. It quickly becomes a struggle to survive against the abominations that are stalking them.
Listen, the worst thing that could have happened to you has already happened, okay? And you're still here. This is just a boxy cave, and there's nothing left to be afraid of, I promise.
The Descent, as a title, can be interpreted both literally and as a descent into madness, with plenty of gore, a claustrophobic setting, and more creepy crawlies than one's sanity can handle.
What are you doing? I just saw something ahead in the tunnel.
The fear of what lies beneath has since become a popular theme in horror, and we might have this British classic to thank for it. Number 18, The Strangers. Our next entry is a tense and chilling horror movie that might not be as graphic or action-packed as other films on this list, but one that plays on our fears of humanity.
Is Tamara here?
No, you got the wrong house.
The Strangers is a realistic movie about 2 everyday people being tormented for no reason whatsoever. It was also inspired by real events, including the Manson murders, lending it an even scarier degree of credibility. While ghosts and elaborate trap-making serial killers are fun, they take place outside of our everyday existence. The Strangers reminds us that darkness and depravity do exist, sometimes literally, in our own backyards. Number 17, Let the Right One In. With Nordic noir thrillers on the rise, audiences were not surprised when Jan Ajvide Lindqvist, Sweden's answer to Stephen King, became an overnight sensation. There was also no doubt that his screenplay, based on his own novel, was going to be a hit. But it didn't only become a hit, it took the world by storm.
Är du vampyr? Jag lever på blod.
The big screen adaptation of his atmospheric tale of a young bullied boy who befriends a young vampire was an immense critical and box office success, winning plenty of awards and immediately greenlighting an American remake.
Eli. Gå! Försvinn!
It plays less like a vampire movie and more like a snowy Arctic fever dream, though it's still got plenty of horror elements as well. Number 16, Drag Me to Hell. Drag Me to Hell saw the long-awaited return of Sam Raimi to the genre that gave him his humble beginnings with Evil Dead.
Soon it will be you who comes begging to me.
The idea came from a script he'd been working on with his brother Ivan throughout the decade, during which he was working on the Spider-Man trilogy. This morality tale follows a young loan officer who regrettably refuses an extension for an old gypsy woman, who in turn puts a curse on her so that she'll be dragged to hell in 3 days.
What am I supposed to do?
You must allow the darkness in. You must invite the dead to commingle with your spirit.
I'm scared.
The director more than delivers all the nasty fun you'd expect from him. Number 15, A Quiet Place. John Krasinski has proven himself to be quite versatile in the past decade, but no move has been more surprising than his foray into directing horror. A Quiet Place takes a solid premise, a world overrun by blind monsters who hunt via heightened sense of hearing, and mines it for all it's worth. The sound design is used masterfully, drawing you into the world of the film and making you fear the slightest pin drop. Krasinski and his cast, including his spouse Emily Blunt, all deliver committed performances that serve as the film's beating heart. You grow attached to the Abbott family, and this attachment creates real and terrifying stakes. Number 14, The Witch. Period piece horror films are hard to pull off. In order to really get under a viewer's skin, we need to somehow relate to the setting and the experiences of the characters on the screen.
We are children of sin all. Yet I tell thee, I have raised up no witch in this house. Let us pray. Then we need fear nothing.
It's safe to say that most cinema-goers aren't a farming family living in New England in the 1630s. Yet filmmaker Robert Eggers managed to craft a deeply unnerving film, one that scares with ambience, psychological dread, and off-screen threats rather than cheap scares. Simply put, The Witch is terrifying, captivating, and impressive all at once. And with Eggers' follow-up film, The Lighthouse, similarly blowing critics away, this young director seems poised to bring us quality horror films for decades to come.
How long have we been on this rock? 5 weeks? 2 days? Help me to recollect.
Number 13, Evil Dead. Horror reboots can be extremely hit or miss. Most suck, but some, like Evil Dead, manage to successfully bring the story and characters to modern audiences.
Honda.
While the first Evil Dead did deliver some genuine scares in 1981, this reboot completely does away with the original sense of humor, as it's interested solely in scaring and revolting its audience.
Once he feasts on 5 souls, the sky will bleed again, and the abomination will rise from hell.
Telling the story of a detox trip gone wrong, this brutally terrifying film will have you thinking twice about reciting random incantations from books found in mysterious cabins, if you were ever thinking about it. Seriously though, even for horror fans, Evil Dead is not for the faint of heart. Number 12, Final Destination. Amidst the slasher craze of the 2000s, New Line Cinema took it one step further and turned Death himself into the antagonist.
You know, I've never dealt with death before. This could all be in our head. It just feels like it's all around us.
Based on an abandoned X-Files script idea, the twisted story follows a group of teens that narrowly escape a fatal plane explosion.
You have to figure out how and when it's coming back at you.
Well, Death feels cheated and decides to kill them off anyway in bizarre Rube Goldberg-like ways.
They're dying the order they would have died. That's Death's design. Miss Luton's next.
With a villain you never see, a cruel moral to the story of never being able to escape death, and some of the most creative cinematic kills, this box office smash gets major props from the horror community. Number 11, The Babadook. Parenting can be a scary thing, especially when you're doing it alone. But when trying to raise a child while simultaneously navigating the grief of losing a partner, well, that must be downright maddening.
His name is Mr. Babadook, and this is his book. A rumbling sound, then 3 sharp knocks. Babadook, dook, dook.
These are the core themes at work in this remarkable horror film written and directed by filmmaker Jennifer Kent. As single mother Amelia Vanek, Essie Davis does an incredible job conveying the deep exhaustion felt by her character. This is a thoughtful, provocative, and thoroughly human horror film that also has one of the most original and unconventionally scary movie monsters in recent memory. Director William Friedkin, director of The Exorcist, went so far as to say that he had, quote, never seen a more terrifying film. Number 10, The Ring. During a decade that was drowning in terrible American remakes, this gem easily stood out, mostly because of the talent behind it. With the brilliant director who'd be behind the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise and future Oscar-nominated Naomi Watts in the lead role, you had a surefire hit.
It won't stop.
Well, that's why you're here. So that I can help you to make it stop.
A psychological horror flick about a vengeful ghost who uses a videotape to kill her victims, this is a movie that took everything that was already great about the original and built upon it. More backstory, more human emotion, and more deadly thrills. In terms of influence, few films have had as pronounced an effect on the horror genre as The Ring. Number 9, It Follows. This past decade has felt like a renaissance for horror movies, especially those centering on the misadventures of teens. Rather than exploitative slashers with paper-thin plots, we've been treated to some carefully crafted and effective entries like It Follows.
Never go into a place that doesn't have more than one exit. It's very slow, but it's not done.
There's still plenty of teenage lovemaking, sure, but there are also deeper questions about the anxieties of teen sexuality and STIs. It Follows is an impressively shot film featuring some creative wide-angle cinematography and a clear homage to horror filmmakers like John Carpenter. The movie's further amplified by Micah Monroe's performance in the lead role. Ultimately, It Follows is just a really compelling horror film that operates on both a supernatural and psychological level. Plus, it has a great score. Number 8, The Cabin in the Woods. Yes, this film at times feels more comedic than overtly horrific, but we'd like to remind you that it's still got some solid, scary moments. What really earns this movie a spot on our list, however, is how deftly it manages to subvert expectations. And really, isn't that the hallmark of a great horror film?
Oh my god, it's beautiful. I'm the spider, and I'm sleeping in the Rambler.
The Cabin in the Woods initially comes across like any old supernatural or slasher teen horror flick, but below this so-called cabin lies an elaborate government conspiracy, one that makes the whole thing not only feel like a brilliant love letter to the horror genre, but a few dozen different movies fighting one another for screen time.
Yes, you did. Yes, you had zombies, but this is zombie redneck torture family, see? They're entirely separate species. Like the difference between an elephant and an elephant seal.
It's chaotic, brilliantly crafted, and just a whole lot of fun. Number 7, Saw. The one that started it all. Although torture porn became huge thanks to the Saw films, the original independent feature has little to do with its insanely bloody and unnecessarily complicated sequels.
Hello, Amanda. You don't know me, but I know you. I want to play a game.
Saw was more detective thriller than torture porn, more psychological torture than bodily torture.
Most people are so ungrateful to be alive.
The complex puzzle and mystery behind these two men, stuck in a room with a dead body, plays out more like a demented Samuel Beckett play.
There! I've done it! I've killed him with the poison, just like you wanted. Now where's my family?
Still, there are tons of cringeworthy moments, from a brilliant script that keeps you guessing to a jaw-dropping ending you will never forget. And considering it birthed a franchise of more than 8 films, Saw's legacy is basically as big as it gets. Number 6, It. Adapting the works of Stephen King is no small feat, but with 2017's It, filmmaker Andy Muschietti did the source material proud. Bill Skarsgård was perfectly horrifying as Pennywise, bringing the infamous dancing clown to life with a sinister flair and manic energy to great effect.
You'll float down here. We'll float down here. Yes, we do.
Though it relied on jump scares, the film delivers on the horror front without compromise, and in no small part thanks to the looming sense of dread that Pennywise brings to the town of Derry. However, this horror film is also elevated by the excellent performances of its young ensemble cast, and that's what really earns this film a spot on our list. Seriously though, clowns are still the stuff of nightmares.
Beep beep, Richie.
Number 5, 28 Days Later. Like Stanley Kubrick before him, Danny Boyle is the kind of prolific director that likes playing with different genres.
Something in the blood. By the time they tried to evacuate the cities, it was already too late.
After the major successes of Trainspotting and The Beach, he set his eyes on horror, and boy did he leave his mark. A different take on the zombie film, 28 Days Later is an apocalyptic contagion masterpiece, with a brilliant narrative, haunting opening sequence, and devastating scenarios featuring the breakthrough performance of a young Cillian Murphy.
Though it may not be quite what you imagined.
Just feel very lucky to have found you.
You were lucky.
While the virus in question is turning people into violent, mutating creatures, it turns us into a blubbering mess behind the couch. Number 4, The Conjuring. After unleashing not one but two major horror franchises upon the world with Saw and Insidious, filmmaker James Swan delivered one of the greatest haunted house films in decades. Unlike most of the movies on our list, The Conjuring doesn't necessarily feel like it pushes the boundaries of the genre. In fact, it's decidedly old school. What makes it so worthwhile, however, is its attention to detail. It's an incredibly well-crafted and expertly paced film with well-developed characters that we really care about.
He made me do it.
Wan's knack for building tension and breaking it with terrifying scares is a testament to his horror movie experience. In short, it's the perfect supernatural horror film, one with superb scares and a whole lot of replay value. Number 3, Wreck. We're starting to see a pattern. Take an established theme, put it in some very talented hands, and watch something refreshing come to life. Rising Spanish horror directors Paco Plaza and Jaume Balaguero brought the found footage style to a zombie virus outbreak and gave the world this dizzying roller coaster ride in which we trail a news crew that's been following the fire department. It all seems like a boring night until they're locked up in a tenement building where the residents are starting to get a little violent and a little undead. For its influence and legacy in the found footage subgenre, Wreck takes our number 3 spot. Number 2, Get Out. We're definitely witnessing a new generation of horror auteurs leaving their mark on the genre. But arguably no horror filmmaker working today is more exciting than Jordan Peele.
Sink into the floor.
Wait.
Sink.
His highly anticipated second feature, Us, solidified his status as one of the most influential voices in the genre, but it's his directorial debut, Get Out, that takes our number 2 spot.
Get out! Yo, chill, man. Get out! Chill, man!
Wholly original and terrifying in the most unexpected of ways, Get Out delivers scathing yet profound social critiques. It's particularly effective at highlighting liberal racism. Not only that, but Get Out is also a tightly crafted film, expertly shot and well-paced. Add to that a uniquely unnerving ambience and great performances all around, and you've got a modern horror masterpiece.
I mean, I told you not to go in that house.
Before we get to our number 1 horror movie of the century so far, here are a few honorable mentions.
The police are coming back.
They've come and gone.
Well, that's what concerns us, man.
Just want that gun out of the picture.
So you never think about it then?
Think about what?
Being with a girl?
Number 1, Hereditary. This is the sort of movie that people were praising and warning each other about in the same breath. A deeply disturbing supernatural and psychological horror film, Hereditary follows a family haunted by the death of their grandmother, but it's so much more than that. Not only is it extremely unsettling to watch, it's also chock full of unforgettable moments that'll most likely give you nightmares. It's not a pleasant viewing experience, but there's no denying that the film is a true work of art, both narratively and visually, while also serving as the performance of a lifetime for Toni Collette. Where Hereditary might feel like the more focused film, director Ari Aster's 2019 follow-up Midsommar also deserves a nod for managing to be equally unnerving despite its more colorful setting. Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojo and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.